it's fair. I mean, this is my point. Like, the motion picture, when you watch it, feels like all of the pilots that they did. The 3 pilots that they did for the original series. Yes. Where the reason those were so expensive was that they kept having to do special effects shots that they kept making the very good point that they will reuse in every episode. The Enterprise flying by is going to get reused all the time. Right. So yeah, the pilot's going to be very expensive, because then you can do a bottle episode where you have a shot of the Enterprise and then you're all like on the bridge the entire episode.
Right. Yeah.
And that's kind of what they made when they made Wrath of Khan.
Welcome to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Another Pass podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Sam Alisea.
Hello.
And today we have a very special guest for a very special movie. Today we are joined by Michael Fisher, MrMobile himself.
Hello, Case. Hello, Sam. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to talk about Star Trek, which is not a rarity.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, you said it. We're talking about Star Trek today, but we're not talking about one of the odd movies today. Today we are talking about one of the even ones. We're talking about one of the good ones, because this is a 5th episode. So today we are talking about a movie that succeeded in spite of difficulty. It traversed many hurdles. A movie that has continued to live long and has prospered. Because today we are talking about, honestly, the movie that is the reason why we have an ongoing Star Trek franchise. Today we are talking about Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
The movie all the other Star Trek movies want to be.
Yeah, I was just I can hear that opening theme just as you say that. Like, I must have seen this movie 200 times, and I never get tired of talking about it, because, as you say, it is the reason we still have Star Trek today. So we owe it a great debt, don't we?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, it's not that this movie had necessarily a ton of challenges once it got underway. They had very creative people who were very good at their jobs doing it. But there was a lot of upfront adversity just in terms of getting it made, because its predecessor was Star Trek The Motion Picture, which is one of the first movies I talked about on this show. And that is a movie where it's just like, wow, I wish you could have found an editor. That would have been great.
So with Star Trek The Motion Picture, there's a book that I am in the process of reading called Return to Tomorrow, the filming of Star Trek The Motion Picture. And it's an oral history of, well, just what it says on the tin. And I was not aware, after just years of memory alpha dumps and stuff, how fraught that process was, and just what a bear that movie was to make. So it is no small miracle that we were gifted the sequel after all of that nightmare.
Right. But before we get too deep into this one, this is the first time talking about Trek since Sam joined the show. And Michael, you're very public with your fandom for Star Trek. And Star Trek is just part of my brand. So why don't we just go around and talk about our association with it a little bit? Michael, you're our guest. Want to just talk about like your background with the franchise and what drew you to it?
For sure. Yeah, well, I was... I almost became a Star Trek fan by default, by dint of growing up in the early to mid-90s, the sort of golden age of broadcast Star Trek anyway. I mean, Star Trek The Next Generation had become, by the time I was in second grade, popular enough with even mainstream audiences to like get Emmy nominations and be ranked up there next to NYPD Blue for just outstanding drama and things like that. So kind of everyone was watching Star Trek when I grew up, and I fell into that. And then, as tends to happen, immediately became obsessed to what I'm certain my parents felt was a troubling degree. And I collected every prop, every action figure. I watched every episode. You know, I borrowed VHS tapes. I taped them myself. I fell into that hole, and that was 30 years ago, maybe 25 years ago, and my infatuation has never waned. So it's just become a part of my life. I mean, it happened so early in my development that it's basically baked into my DNA. So that's where I'm at with Star Trek.
Nice. I think we're going to have some similar tales because I think we're all about the same age. But Sam, like, you and I actually have only talked in passing about it when you've been wearing like Star Trek socks and so forth, because but you and I are both Star Trek fans, so we just were like, yeah. But I actually don't know the genesis for your fandom.
So my genesis actually is from my mom. My mom is a huge science fiction person. Like, my dad couldn't give two flying fucks about it, Like, but he really liked Star Trek The Next Generation, and it was actually family viewing. Like, we actually sat down as a family and watched it every time it was on. When it ended, we would discuss the episode. We had, like, long discussions as a family, and my dad actually, like, joined in those. But my mom always kind of, like, encouraged all of that stuff. So we watched all of them. In fact, my dad actually ended up watching Voyager and Deep Space Nine and enjoying those slightly more, which was very surprising to me and my mom, because in terms of him and science fiction, like, he's just not always down for it. Like, my mom's a huge Godzilla fan and a Blob fan, and generally my mom used to drag him to those films. Like, he'd be like, oh my God, again. So my mom's into all of that. Like, anything, honestly, anything with a monster and a space mystery and, you know,
a rubber forehead.
My mom will even watch like you know, like this really bad made for like sci-fi movie like made for TV, like, you know, the shark cobra connection or whatever they are, like where Sci-Fi Movie Channel used to make like hybrid animals that would attack people with bad CGI. My mom would be like, this movie's amazing, and I'd be like, Mom, why are you watching this? And she's like laughing her ass off. She's like, no, but it's hilarious, and look, she's in the water, she's gonna die, this is great. So a lot of my passion came from her, and just kind of it being normal to just embrace exploration and it being really cool, and also just like there are really wonderful empathetic characters, you know. That's the amazing thing about Star Trek, is you can always find a character that you relate to, right? Because there's so many different types of people, and it's so introspective, and generally, I'm not speaking about all stuff, but generally the characters are written with a certain amount of empathy, you know, from the writers. Not that every character is empathetic, but I feel like the writers give most of the characters a fair chance, right? There's always a sort of lesson to learn or a point of view you didn't think of that they're kind of like letting you examine. Try not to push too hard depending on the series, let's be honest. But you know what I mean? Like, and so I've always enjoyed Star Trek because there's something lovely about that. Like, you know, I do love Star Wars, but if I had to choose which world to live in, it would be Star Trek, because I don't want to live in perpetual war. I would rather live in a space where I can actually travel, explore, learn new things. Yeah. You know, something that's a little more altruistic, honestly. And that's
Amen.
The beauty of Star Trek. I mean, I still want a lightsaber, just like putting that out there. But, you know, I don't want to be at war all the time.
Yeah, it doesn't get brought up very much, but definitely by the 24th century, they definitely can do lightsabers. They can do solid holograms.
Yeah, true.
Sure.
They just never do it.
Right. Even in the 24th century, there are licensing departments and lawyers. So,
right.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, those toxic fanboys, we'll never hear the end of it if they become Starfleet regalia.
Right.
Yeah, I think kind of in the same way, I sort of like default rolled into it. In my case, it was my father, who was a really big Star Trek fan, and so it was on syndication on Sunday mornings, and we'd watch it after church, and that was sort of like my like intro for it when I was like 4 or 5. And then as I got older, it just sort of stayed as part of it, or like part of like my core. Like TNG reruns and Deep Space Nine reruns would be on all the time at night before I would go to bed when I was in high school, so I'd like typically watch like Frasier back to back with TNG on UPN, and it was like, all right, this is good viewing, and now I'm going to go to bed right now, because I was like,
you and I had the same viewing schedule. Apparently, I remember sitting on my bed and I was always a night owl, and yeah, Seinfeld, Frasier, Next Gen, DS9. And then if you stayed up past that, it was 3 a.m. You might as well just stay up all night.
Right. And at the time, I was trying to be a good student because I wanted to go to a good college. So I was actually trying to have like not as much of a night owl schedule as contrasted by the rest of my life. And then after college, because like I stayed like a casual Trek fan in that phase, like I had friends who were like bigger Trek people, and I'd like come over and hang out, but I was never like a big collector of Star Trek stuff. But then after college, I linked up with a Star Trek fan film group, and so I worked with them for a long time. In fact, our last film is coming out this year, fingers crossed, after a 5-year production cycle on that one. So,
Kaser, you probably will plug this later, but what's the name of that?
So the group is Starship Farragut.
Yeah, I've heard of you guys. I haven't watched any of them, I don't think, but definitely been aware of it on like the fringes of stuff. I'm going to shortlist that now. That's awesome.
They're like, some of them are harder to watch now just because video technology has dramatically improved. Like a lot of it was shot in standard def, and it's like you can kind of see it
still.
But there's some really great ones, and I'll shoot you links to the better ones that we've done.
Please.
But yeah, we I started off doing like extra work in it, and then was doing like production work. So I was like the production manager on the most recent one, and all of those are that like really like amplified my fandom, because it was like really infectious working with people who were just so passionate about Star Trek fandom that they talked about it all the time. You got to see all the different viewpoints about why all these different people really enjoyed it, and that prompted me to be like, you know what, I'm gonna like rewatch all of Star Trek. I like rewatched all the series in order, like really doubled down on it. It just reminded myself how much the series meant to me as a whole.
That's like 800 hours of TV you watched.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, there were chunks of unemployment and whatnot.
He had some time.
You made the most of the time. Good for you.
Yeah, this was over the course of a couple of years. It wasn't like in one go, but
not just one quarantine.
Yeah, but like I said, I talked about the motion picture, which was one of the last things I actually watched in all of Star Trek, prior to like the new materials that have been coming out early in this series. And I posited when I watched it that a lot of the excesses of it were coming from the perspective of trying to make a movie that you could then reuse assets for later ones. And oh my God, I was so happy when I was doing research on this one to find out that that's exactly what they did. Mm-hmm. Like, Trek has a long history of taking every piece of material that they construct for it and reusing it again and again and again. Right from the beginning of this movie, you can see that they're trying to save money and create an amazing economical production by virtue of, we've got the Klingon shot from the first movie. Mm-hmm. That's how we're going to set it up.
Yeah.
There's the reused space dock footage. Yeah, the Klingon cruisers, the sets, which I didn't know were still left standing after the motion picture. I mean,
that surprised me that it was so fully left standing.
Yeah. Normally they rip them right down and reuse that set for something else. Then when they have to build the Enterprise bridge again, they literally build it again. I couldn't believe that the set was actually still there.
I guess it was because they spent so much money on it, and it was successful. Like, that's the thing. Like, financially, the motion picture did pretty well. It just critically, not so much. And it wasn't hugely profitable because it was also expensive, but it still turned a profit and had a huge box office and seemed to guarantee that a sequel would get made, even if they were dubious about the property.
What was crazy, and we shouldn't beat up on motion picture too much for the financials, because as has always been the case in Hollywood, you have a lot of creative accounting going on. And a lot of the development of Star Trek Phase 2, the canceled TV series from the 70s, like a lot of that production allocation was kind of tacked onto the motion picture's balance sheet. Like, Paramount was not interested in taking the rap for everything. Like, your points on the on our rundown are very accurate. There's a lot of meddling, there's a lot of creative differences, but this movie also carries a lot of financial burden that it was not necessarily responsible for. So we got to give it a little bit of a break there. But it was still going to be 3 times more expensive than the money they were allocating for Wrath of Khan. So you're right. Yeah.
Well, and it's fair. I mean, this is my point. Like, the motion picture, when you watch it, feels like all of the pilots that they did. The 3 pilots that they did for the original series. Yes. Where the reason those were so expensive was that they kept having to do special effects shots that they kept making the very good point that they will reuse in every episode. The Enterprise flying by is going to get reused all the time.
Right.
So yeah, the pilot's going to be very expensive, because then you can do a bottle episode where you have a shot of the Enterprise and then you're all like on the bridge the entire episode.
Right. Yeah.
And that's kind of what they made when they made Wrath of Khan.
Yeah, the thing is, I don't. There's one particular motion picture thing that I cannot let us get past without mentioning, and I didn't know this until today. Robert Wise, the director, was so stressed on that production. Apparently, this is according to the 50-year mission book by Edward Gross and Mark Altman. This is John Povell speaking. I remember that when we were in production on the film, every day, Bob Wise, the director, would have lunch in his office and have 1 glass of vodka, pretty much straight up. Certainly not to excess, just one to steel himself for the rest of the day. The overall frame of it was 35 years. I've never experienced anything like this. Just unfucking believable. He could not believe how dysfunctional this production was. And I'm like, yep, I believe it. It's
Yeah.
a lot of chefs in the kitchen.
Yeah. And as much as I hate to say it, it was probably a good idea to remove the number of chefs in play when it comes time for Wrath of Khan. Roddenberry was pushed back from being a hands-on producer to being an EP. He was a consultant. He does have things that he did for this, but he did not have final say on pretty much anything, which is probably a good idea. Roddenberry has a history of being great on the ideas, but other people need to execute, as you can see with, unfortunately, after his passing, with TNG becoming substantially stronger.
It feels icky to have to acknowledge that, right? It does, of course, but it's true. I mean, there are people who are really good at executing a concept, and then there are people who are really good at having a concept, and often they're not the same person. Yeah. That's just how it goes, right?
That was all a very solemn nod from all of us.
Yeah.
Right.
There was like a, yeah. Yeah.
Well, and it's particularly icky with TNG because Roddenberry passes away, and that's why he was no longer involved.
Right.
But with The Wrath of Khan, it was not that way. The producers stepped in and were like, no, other people need to work on this because, or not really the producers, pardon me, the money, like Paramount. The crazy quote that I found in terms of this, so they brought in Harv Bennett, who was not familiar with Star Trek, but had a history working in TV. And one of the execs asked him, after Bennett admits that he thought that the motion picture was kind of boring, it's a perfectly good movie. It is 50% longer than it should be. Every shot is way too long. Mm-hmm. After he admitted that he thought it was kind of boring, one of the execs asked if he could make a better movie, and he said, absolutely. Can you make it for less than $45 million? And that became sort of like, this is the modus operandi for this production. We are going to save some money and get this thing together. And Bennett wasn't familiar with Star Trek, but he respected the franchise enough that he watched every single episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
And started got the ball rolling, brought in Nicholas Myers eventually, got scripts going, started working with the franchise, working with the lore, building it into something that was coherent and exciting and also was going to be fiscally viable.
Yeah. And that process, developing the story. I mean, reading about this, it is an absolute nightmare to someone like me who largely sits on his own little island and does his own creative work day in and day out without the dangers of, committees. Because this thing had 5 scripts before it even had I won't jump ahead, but I mean, the changes were so vast from script to script to script to script that at the end, as you're going to bring up, Nick Meyer agreed to a ridiculous deal just to get the movie done.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to think I would like to work in movies as an actor, which frankly sounds a lot simpler than any of this production side stuff, because the more you read about this, the more I am stunned that anything ever actually gets put on screen with all the power plays and deal making and things that have to go on for this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many. I mean, as you pointed out before, there were too many cooks in the previous production. That doesn't, and removing a few cooks doesn't mean that you only have one. All of a sudden, they had fewer cooks for this one. But yeah, I mean, trying to put together a movie is one of the craziest things you could conceive of because there are so many moving parts.
Yes, and so many opinions and so many people whose toes you can't afford to step on. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We talked about Star Trek. Well, we've talked about several Star Trek. We talked about Star Trek Insurrection not too long ago. And on that episode, one of the interesting things was that Patrick Stewart, great actor, awesome human being, was getting a lot of clout and star power at that point. And all of a sudden, can't piss him off anymore. So you have to make sure that the movie you're making sort of works with what he wants, in addition to what the screenwriter wants, that the director wants, that the studio wants, that the budget will allow for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. I know we're not talking about Picard on this one, but I have found that the more Patrick Stewart has gotten involved in the storytelling, the scripting part of the franchise, the less I have enjoyed the Picard character. It's I get where he's coming from. He wants more sex and shooting. I think that's a verbatim quote.
Yeah.
And it's I get it, man. If I were you, I would also want the same thing. But the Picard I love was thoughtful and, all the things that apparently Patrick Stewart was tired of doing. So it's always dangerous when you have when you cross the streams a little bit, right?
Yeah. And fortunately, the Star Trek was not the monolith that it has since become. Like, it was at this point 3 seasons in one movie and the animated series at this point. There was not so much canon and there was not so much fandom to sort of propel it forward. The biggest reason Star Trek the Motion Picture got made was because Star Wars was popular. And so, space was in, but at this point, who was to say if it was space or if it was Star Wars specifically? So that's when we get into sort of the interesting thing in terms of like the actors who were involved with this franchise. Because at this point, Shatner did not have the same clout that that Patrick Stewart would have later in the runs of all of the next gen movies. Like we're dealing with a point now where the actors are starting to get older, and Shatner, for example, wanted to use makeup to sort of be presented as a young captain still, and Myers, when he took over on the production, was like, "I'm sorry, that's not what we think would be interesting anymore. Like, the fact of the matter is, it's 20 years since the show was going.
Yeah,
we need to actually address that in a way that the motion picture did a little bit. Like, everyone had kind of advanced in their careers, but it didn't really present that as a stumbling block for anyone. And so you see one of the big themes of the movie come about just naturally by virtue of the fact that, like, they are dealing with older actors, that age and mortality have to be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm so grateful that happened, because that is one of the ways I can still relate to this film. It is no mystery to me that at the age of 10, I loved this movie, and so did a lot of my friends, right? There's a lot to enjoy. There's a lot to appreciate from the swashbuckling sense and the combat sense and the adventure, the weird Genesis stuff. But now that I'm way older and I don't feel the same about things, and I have regrets in life, and I'm having weird aches that for no reason. I can really appreciate all of the themes, the themes about aging that are woven into the narrative, and which resulted from Nick Meyer sitting there with 5 scripts and saying, "Well, you said no to all of these, so let's just pick the things in each of these that we like, and then I'll throw them together over 12 days."
Yeah.
Remarkable. For free. His agent said he was crazy for taking that.
Right.
I mean, I think that it also is just like kind of brilliant, right? Because it gives them a chance to really work with something, especially since you're bringing something from the past back, right? We're bringing back this character from this past episode to kind of remind them that kind of being on your way to becoming Admiral, you made some mistakes. And it's beautiful because it adds this like layer to the film, and it's not, it's so reflective. It's great. I love it.
It really is. And I mean, I don't know if we were going to talk about that or not, but can we just touch on the ridiculous decision Kirk made that got him into this situation in the first place?
Yeah.
To let the genetically engineered super soldier take over a planet?
With his whole crew of other super soldiers.
I mean, that is what you do, right? Like, you decide that you are not equipped fully to deal with the problem. Like, this is actually, honestly, how many of us have done things like this in our 20s? We have decided we are not fully equipped to deal with a particular problem. And so we decide that the best thing is to kind of push it off to the side and delay it in some way, right? So he was just like, right. I'm going to leave you here. And like, yeah, you've got this whole planet. Good luck.
Good luck with that.
Good luck with that. Gonna leave now. And I think we should also talk about Khan just also not being able to take his own personal responsibility, because he was fine with that deal. And his wife was also fine with that deal, because I rewatched that episode before we did this.
Yeah,
and
let's talk about Space Seed for a little bit.
Yeah.
Here, because I watched this movie long before I ever watched Space Seed.
Same.
I think a lot of people are in that boat because this is the famous Star Trek movie. Like, it's way easier to watch than just random episode in season 1. But the choice to have it be a sequel to Space Seed is kind of brilliant. And that episode, definitely begs for a sequel, like, because it is a terrible decision at the end. As you pointed out.
Spock straight up says it at the end of that episode. He's like, it would be interesting, Captain, to have another story about this, maybe in a longer form in movie theaters in 15 years. And see about this ridiculous,
Just about.
Well, he actually said it would be interesting to come back 100 years and see what seed that crop grew. Like what, and like, I was like, yeah, Spock, you should have just been like, we should have just locked them up, or I don't know, something.
Or at least put out a warning buoy. Just,
yeah.
You know. But
or at least checked on them. And that's the time between is even crazier. But yeah,
which Below Decks makes a joke about, actually. That, like, Star Trek has instituted a rule that you have to go and check up on, like, planets every 2 years to make sure so they don't come back to haunt you later.
It's a really good policy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, if this movie hadn't come out, Space Seed would almost require a next-gen episode, because it's perfectly set up there, where it's just like, I wonder what it'll be like in 100 years. And then 100 years later, like, oh, hey.
Yeah.
And to the movie's credit, like, it really makes Kirk pay for that mistake.
Yeah.
Without something that I think some modern Star Trek might have the temptation to do, which is, put him on trial in a very visible thing, or have these, what I consider to be rather mawkish scenes, kind of telling, not showing. Kirk literally, he loses so much in this movie and in the next one as a direct result of this really bad decision he made 15 years ago. That's scary to think about, legitimately,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it feels realistic in a way, because honestly, like, he's been roaming around the galaxy, having affairs, let's be honest. Like, that was one of his things.
Which also comes back to bite him in this movie.
Yes. Yeah. Which also, there's other layers there. But, like, this movie's about a reckoning for our dear captain, really. Just everything coming home to roost. But I think that, he would have made mistakes, because, like he said in the film, he's always cheating death. He's always just barely escaping. And when you are living in a world where you are just living to kind of survive and get by, you're going to do things that are in that gray area. And that's where Star Trek is the most interesting, when their characters have to make choices in that gray area, and it's kind of questionable whether or not that was the right choice or the wrong choice, or, humane or not. And so I think that that's one of the things that's just so great about this film, because it sets that precedence for, like, the next, series of, everything that came after, really.
Yeah. But particularly the franchise as a whole. I mean, it's hard to fit this movie in with the motion picture just in terms of aesthetics, like the uniform switch, mainly the uniform switch. But there's also really similar beats. Like, it feels like this was a redux. And I found out, I didn't actually realize this. Apparently, it was initially marketed as just Star Trek The Wrath of Khan with no 2 on it. And it's all in later releases where they added the 2, which I don't know how I never knew that until today when I was reading up on it last minute. Like, oh, that makes so much more sense. Because it kind of just feels like we're going to do the proper continuation of the original series now. And not to say that the motion picture, again, I actually really like the motion picture, but it does feel like a different direction of doing that sequel series. I mean, it was originally a script for Phase 2. This is not a script for Phase 2. This is its own animal that they're doing, lovingly looking at the original show and saying, what do we do for the fans specifically?
It is an interesting kind of showcase of the versatility of cinema and of this property in particular, because you're making great points with regard to the motion picture. Like, think about all that they had to reuse, both practically and for budget reasons. I mean, it's the same sets, but the same Starship Enterprise. It's the same model. It's the same aesthetic. It's the same universe. But in this movie, as opposed to motion picture, I mean, motion picture is a thoughtful, plodding 70s, sort of 2001-ish thought piece. And this is a swashbuckling master and commander submarine movie / pirate movie in space. And also Moby Dick. right? So it's like to have a franchise that can survive being both things is remarkable. To have it that adaptable. But it's very fortunate that that Wrath of Khan and motion picture can exist in the same cinematic universe
with the same cast. It's not weird to say Deep Space Nine has a very different vibe than Voyager, because those are different shows telling different stories, even if the technology the characters are using is the same. Mm-hmm. Like they're wildly different shows in different locales. This is literally the same ship with the same basic group of people having an entirely different kind of adventure, and neither one feels wrong for those people.
Yes.
It's a truly impressive bit in that regard. And part of that is that we got all these actors back. It is really cool that they got all of the principal actors from the series. And that was difficult to do. Not everyone wanted to come back. Not everyone was in a good position to come back. And then Ricardo Montalban had no real incentive and had a lot of scheduling issues because he was doing Fantasy Island at that time. And so it's impressive who we all got back for this. Like I said, Shatner wanted to come back, but he wanted to continue playing young, and he was told no and had to roll with it. So that's good. Jimmy Doohan actually just had a heart attack right before this happened, and that they actually make a nod to that in the movie, saying that McCoy saved him.
I had no idea that was a reference to that. That's an amazing Easter egg.
I know. I didn't know it either until I was doing research for this. And I was like, okay, well, I'm glad he's okay. I'm glad he made it back on this one.
I had a wee bout, sir.
Right.
Wee bout of what?
Let's see. DeForest Kelley was so dissatisfied with earlier scripts that he almost didn't return. Fortunately, Meyer's final draft actually convinced him to stay. And Leonard Nimoy desperately didn't want to be attached to this movie anymore. This is the I am not Spock phase of his career, and was only convinced to come back for it on the principle that he would be killed almost immediately. And so early drafts were he dies right at the beginning.
Yeah, I did enjoy reading that because he was very pointedly not on board. At least one of these scripts had no role for Spock, or it killed him off right away. And then it wasn't. It was Bennett and someone else who was working on the scripts, and Bennett said, "We're never going to get Leonard." And he was like, "Get him on the phone." Gets him on the phone. He's like, "Tell him you're going to kill him." And it was like a 5-minute conversation, and apparently Leonard Nimoy was like, "All right, I'm in."
It's weird how that works. Charlton Heston had the same situation with Beneath the Planet of the Apes, where he was like, "Can you just kill me right at the beginning?" And they're like, "Well, what if we make you disappear right at the beginning, and then when you show up, you die almost immediately afterwards?" And that's why that's why B-list Charlton Heston knockoff is the main character for the majority of that movie.
I did not know that either. Yeah, it's amazing how that happens, right?
Weirdly setting up Escape from the Planet of the Apes, which has Ricardo Montalban in it. As one of the few actors to be in multiple Planet of the Apes movies, because he's in that and then Conquest of the Planet of the Apes.
Huh. I did not know.
As the father figure / circus trainer for Caesar. Yeah, the Planet of the Apes movies are weird.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
I love them, but they are weird.
Probably not going to shortlist those, but thank you for the information.
Escape is a 70s comedy where the apes have gone back in time and are living as celebrities in America.
Yeah.
And then Conquest is a slave uprising movie.
Not sure if serious.jpg.
There we go. The circus ones are way better, but there is their charm. And again, there's Ricardo Montalban, who makes everything better. Everything. I recently watched the Kathy Lee Crosby failed Wonder Woman pilot from 1976, the one where she is a non-powered martial artist spy. And in that one, Ricardo Montalban is the main villain, and he's the best part of that.
He's the best part of so many things he's in, I feel like, right?
Yeah. Including this. Everyone's great in this, but he is so good. Yeah. This is one of the career makers for him in terms of, or I shouldn't say establishing him, but in terms of cementing him in the memory of everyone. How many, he has been in tons of roles over his life, but 50 years later, we're going to be talking about Khan.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not only does he have some of the best lines, but he has the best delivery of all of his lines.
Oh, absolutely.
He's incredible. Honestly, I had to stop myself because I was rewatching today. I had to stop myself from just rewinding a couple of times because he's just so intense, right? So, they unfortunately, because of his scheduling issues, he wasn't actually they weren't able to put him in a room with Captain Kirk, right? Khan and
I
Kirk.
wanted to get to that, yeah.
Yeah. So like they're not going to be together, but somehow through screens, like just talking through each other, like all of us in 2020, and us right now. But there was such intensity between these two actors, and that's partially just because he just carried up. Like you believed that he hated Kirk, like he was gonna find him, and he hated him, and he was gonna he was just from his throne room on that other ship. He was gonna end him, and it was so good. I mean, there was like lines that were like Shakespearean in nature, and then he would go like from like this like Shakespearean delivery to something totally normal. Like it would be like, you know, something poetic, and then he'd be like warp speed, and you're like, how does he do it? It didn't even feel different, but it was so good. Like and he also said that he was so like involved with his role on Fantasy Island that he asked the producers to get him a copy of Speed Space so that he could watch it over and over and over, so that he could channel back in to Khan and this dictator and who he was. So that's what he would do before he'd go to film. He would just watch the episode over and over, and then he would go and film.
That's one of the things I love reading about as well. Like all of that process. My background is in acting, like I say, and I cannot imagine the challenge of having to plug back in to a character I played, 12, 13 years ago, whatever it was, and had probably not thought of since. Right?
Yeah.
Ricardo Montalban, apparently, his first impulse was to say, well, if I've spent all this time on this planet stewing in my rage, then everything has to be played to like an 11. And Nick Meyer, when he was directing him on his first scene, he was kind of like, oh my God, what have I done? Because Ricardo Montalban was apparently just blowing the doors off and like monologuing so hard at the cameras that he was, breaking things with his mind. And he pulled him out. He's like, oh, that was great. That was great. You know how that thing where crazy people, they're really frightening because you don't know what they're going to do next. But it's not always that big. And he has a couple great comparisons to other actors there. And apparently he was terrified that Montalban was going to just ignore him and play it the way he wanted. But Montalban was like, good. You are going to direct me. I need directing. And they had a wonderful relationship. And you can see it because his performance is stunning in the whole movie.
I love that because it's actually very similar to like one thing that happens in Space Speed. He actually, like, at one point when the woman, I can't remember, his future wife, I can't remember names. I'm the worst at that.
MacGyver's is the character.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she comes in and she like kind of wants to stay with him because she's drawn to him because honestly, like, I know that this was made years ago, but in my head, like, I was like, when she first saw him, I was like, ooh, this chick is thirsty. I was like, where's the internet slang on this? I was like, but it's true.
I mean, one of his superpowers is just raw sex appeal. Like, that's...
Yeah.
It's got to be a pheromone thing combined with just the magnificence.
I mean, with that deep V on that chest, how could you ignore that? Raw sex appeal all day. But like, she like says something and he's just like she like goes to leave, or she's like, I'm not sure if he goes, Nick, no, you tell me if you want to stay. Now you ask me permission to stay. And I was like, so like, it's kind of like the same person with the director. No, you direct me now. I like you.
Right.
I mean, it does such a good job of having this character who's been trapped with like a limited reading material and like on the verge of death for 15 years. They really get that kind of crazy that you would get to, and that's why Moby Dick works so well for him as this thing to just like read and reread and reread, and work then as a metaphor for everything he does.
I mean, I just want to say again, though, he chose to get off the ship, and she chose to get off with him. Kirk did not sentence them to death. He may not have
this
known.
Is classic crazy.
I know, but I just want to say that it's classic crazy because he cannot take responsibility for how he failed his people and the woman he took with him, who was a superior woman, according to him in that episode. It was a very weird line. Stuck in my brain forever.
This is probably a good time to just drop this note. So Madeline Rue, who played Marla MacGyver's in Space Seed, apparently developed multiple sclerosis in the interim and was confined to a wheelchair at this point. And so they made the decision to write her out as having died, as opposed to bringing her back for this movie, which I feel torn about, because from a motivational standpoint, it makes a lot of sense to like push him over the edge. And then it's characterized then further. Every mistake, he can't own any mistake in this movie. That's like as it goes, he never is able to sort of accept the fact that he is fucked up consistently throughout this whole movie. True. He can't. He's superior. That arrogance is the thing that drives him. So it works as like, okay, so this is the background detail that then pushes him forward. But on the other hand, it's like, well, that's kind of fucked up. That, like, for one thing, you could have easily written a character as being incapacitated by this hostile world, and for another, I don't know, I just like would like to promote handicapped actors or
sure
or disabled actors.
It would have been great to see her again too, because she played that part wonderfully, even though it was, to your point, Sam, was a problematically written part. Given the benefit of retrospect, but maybe that's one of the things that could have been done more smoothly if this thing hadn't been cobbled together from 5 scripts over 12 days. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but, by a guy who didn't want to take a writing credit for it. Like it drives me nuts sometimes, because you're right, the potential is there for more, but I think it does work. I would love to have seen her again, but it does lend further teeth to Khan's anger. I mean, including my beloved wife. It's like, wow, he blames you for killing his wife. You can't get more in someone's shithouse than that,
Yeah.
Yeah, again, in terms of just writing it, it feels like, that makes perfect sense. In terms of, but it also does kind of feel like fridging a character that you didn't actually have to fridge. Like,
yeah. I could see that. We're going to kill her off, so he has motivation.
Yeah, but let's get into some of the filming stuff. We talked about how, because of Montalban's schedule, he was never able to be on the same screen, or on stage with Shatner, which apparently caused them to cut some stuff, like a potential sword fight that they were supposed to have at one point. And even just like a face-to-face confrontation, they weren't able to do. And that part is well known. Like, it's like, everyone knows that, Khan and Kirk are never on screen together in Wrath of Khan, and also Chekhov wasn't supposed to recognize him, and vice versa. Those are like the two trivia bits people always remember from Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
But here was a crazy stat that I read that makes a lot of sense once you think about it, which is that 65% of the movie was shot on the bridge.
Jeez. More than half the movie takes place on that set.
Yeah.
Yeah, one set.
Yep.
So when I call this a bottle episode, I mean it. Like, it's pretty close to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's another testament to the power of restrictions, right? I mean, that's a direct consequence of scheduling issues and a monstrously slashed budget. And despite the fact that we are spending so much time in that one room, if the story is concrete enough and the performances are there, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
That's why fan films work.
Right. And I've been on those sets where we have had those kind of conversations of like, well, how can you make it really dramatic? How can you make this set feel different, even though it's literally the same set, just supposedly on a different ship? Mm-hmm. You can do all these kinds of like little tricks. You can change the gels on the lights to just give it a slightly different mood. You can, ultimately the Reliant is just the Enterprise.
Yeah.
And it was even originally supposed to be a Constitution-class starship.
Which would have been very confusing for anyone who'd never seen Star Trek before.
Right, especially when you get into a dogfight.
Yeah, exactly. Now, which one? It's like watching The Expanse, which I adore. But in those space combat scenes, I'm like, this is so realistic, I have no idea what's going on. I'll just wait to see who dies.
For me, that's like watching Dark Knight, because everything's black and I don't know what car is in front of what.
Yeah, oh man, yeah. Light the scene.
What do they do with explosions?
Kind of, every now and then. I was like dizzy. I'm sorry, I don't mean to Batman hate. Go on.
No, it's fine. I'm always here for Batman hate. I also host a Superman podcast. But actually, so getting back to some of the budget stuff, the fact that they were able to shoot this as economically as they could and have it look as good as it did actually prompted the studio to approve an additional $3 million on their budget, which normally when we talk about movies in terms of like how we could fix them, so for the regular episodes, we usually have to like justify if the budget would be increased, like how you would do it. And this is how you prove that you can make a good movie, and you can get reshoot money. You can get additional money to put a thing in there that everyone will agree will really sell it. Will really make the money on it.
Yeah. That was a fortunate turn of events for this movie, which needed some breaks in the production process for sure.
Now, there apparently was a script leak that occurred before they went into it, where the fact that Spock was going to die hit not the internet. Pardon me. That's not the real words.
I was like, the internet.
Sorry.
When did this come out? Are we on a time loop? Are we?
Pardon me. I have talked about so many script leaks of post 1995 where that's just how it goes. The script leaked, though, in fan corners. They would get hate mail because they found out that Spock was supposed to die right at the beginning, which is why they modified the Kobayashi Maru scene to be more of a fake out to basically tease the audience, and then shock us when it actually does happen. So there's an argument that Spock is not supposed to die at the beginning, or at where he does at the end of the movie. There's an argument that he actually should die at the end of Act 1, and that was the original intent. Now, is that necessarily the case? I buy it. I buy it, at least at some version of the production, they were going to do it that way. Apparently, Leonard Nimoy, who hated working on the motion picture a lot and felt, completely pigeonholed into a role by the original series, really liked working on this movie and wanted to actually expand his role. And ultimately, they shot additional stuff behind Nick Meyer's back to allow for the return of Spock in Star Trek 3.
Yeah, after the test audiences hated it because they left theaters so depressed.
Well, that's why they inserted the weird shot of the capsule starting to open that they just shot at a park in San Francisco.
Oh, with the torpedo, the coffin?
Yeah, yeah. They were in a park and they had fog machines, and that's again how you make something economical.
Looks great, to be honest.
Just make it work.
Fog machines, lighting, and camera angles.
Exactly.
Ta-da!
I love the color that knowledge that the Spock's death in the simulator scene was done to throw people off, because it really lends a lot of great color to Shatner's line there when he comes into the simulator after they've blown the thing up and he looks at Spock on the ground and he's like, "Aren't you dead?"
Right.
It's such a great moment when you know why it's there, and I can just picture 1982 audiences in the theater laughing / breathing a sigh of relief,
Mm-hmm.
And then thinking that they were safe
Exactly.
until the end.
Yeah.
Bam!
Yeah.
Right.
Which I still
And then
teared
we
up
all well
today.
up. Yeah.
I teared up today, definitely. I was like,
Oh, it'll
are you
get
this is going to happen? I've seen this before. It's a really beautiful moment between friends. He's going to die. I knew there's another movie and he's not dead, but it doesn't matter. I was just so... It was sad. It was sad, people.
True. Yeah.
But it was a good moment. It was good acting.
It sneaks up on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those bastards.
I mean, the script is so well paced, and it has such wonderful foreshadowing. I mean, we referenced the Moby Dick stuff and how that all ties into the sort of Captain Ahab nature of Khan. We talked about the aging kind of components, but things like the reading glasses and how that sort of acts as a metaphor for Spock. He helps bring clarity to what Kirk is looking at.
Yeah.
And then the glasses get broken at the same time that Spock dies. And so...
Yeah.
There we go. A Tale of Two Cities is a book that has similar kind of vibes and foreshadows the death of Spock as well, because that's how the book ends. Right. Spoiler for the Tale of Two Cities.
Oh no!
Line through that on my reading list. Thanks a lot, Kate.
Yeah.
You probably should anyway. It's not a. It's
Spoiled
not a
it for
pleasurable
everyone
read.
listening. Actually, it's not, guys. It's really not.
Right. Great for when it came out.
Sure.
English is a different language now than it was then. But I think we can all just agree that once Meyer did the hammering out of the script, it ultimately was just a really strong work, and that having so much TV experience going into this, they were able to shoot a movie very efficiently that other studios would stumble over and be like, how could you not spend so much money on it? Most of the money ultimately went into the cast and to special effects.
Yeah.
And well spent in both cases, because this was the first time they were working with ILM, is that right? Because motion picture was not
this
ILM.
is the beginning of CGI in film, which was fucking mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Honestly, this movie still looks pretty good. Case and I have been watching a lot of movies, and there's a lot of stuff where the effects are just you're like, oh my gosh, this looks terrible. But considering that this looks better than some of the movies we've watched that have taken place and effects have been done in 1992. It holds up really well. It still looks really polished. It still looks really good. I mean, like, it's like slower moving than like what we're used to now, like now we get shots of like CGI spaceships like zooming across and it's more like they're kind of floating along, but it still looks really good for when it was shot.
And I love how intentional that is, though. Like that slow. This was, Star Wars was out. We knew what starfighter battles looked like, and yeah, that's Top Gun in space. Sure, if you want to do that, but if you want to make Master and Commander or Horatio Hornblower in space, these are big galleons. They move at 8 knots. It's like if you fall overboard one of these things, you can swim and catch up to it. And that's what I love about the Wrath of Khan battles, because the vessels have mass.
Yeah.
You are really given an impression that, wow, these things are huge, and they are slugging each other like big heavyweights rather than 6-year-olds slapping each other around. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, like, part of that comes from like the better episodes of Trek have usually treated it as ships or submarine warfare in space rather than trying to do like fighter pilot kind of stuff like Star Wars.
Right.
So we get all that in the Nebula, which really cool stuff that they were doing with the filming. I kind of want to just call attention to some of the cool creative stuff they did, just because like it's just like fun trivia in general. So I mentioned the CGI thing. So this is for the Genesis transforming sequence that occurs in there. This was apparently coming from a technician who had worked for Boeing, trying to do 3D mapping for air flights, and figured out a way to properly render mountains for how they would do mapping. And then he went to go work for ILM, and that basically like launched CGI for filmmaking. Because up until that point, we're talking about like matte work and model work and so forth. So that's just like a cool bit of trivia. Like, this is one of the first ever CG movies in existence, which is just boom.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Just can't get over. The Genesis sequence had a massive explosive, which actually this movie holds the Guinness Book of World Records for slowest shot, or rather fastest shot than played at 24 frames. So they shot this explosion at 2,500 frames per second to maximize the footage. So when played at 24, it's like this very slow most slow-mo in film is either 60 or 90 frames. This is, in some cases you might get like 120. But in this case, we're talking 2,500.
Wow. Talking about the when the Reliant explodes at the end for the Genesis device detonation?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
And then here's a cool one also, which was, all right, so when on film, it is notoriously difficult to show like a monitor because the screen refresh rate often causes like a flickering effect. And so in the motion picture, what they had done was they did they actually had rear projections for all of the screens. But for this one, they actually were able to, they figured out a way to sync the monitor frame rate to be 24 frames and match the actual camera motion so that you could heavily use monitors, which honestly at this is like the time where having screens on screen was becoming kind of required, especially for sci-fi. So it's just cool that they figured that out. Like, I just want to like give props that it's like, oh yeah, that's because that's hard.
It was hard even in 1993 or whenever they were getting ready to do the pilot for DS9. That's the first place I ever read that, where they were like, yeah, we filled ops with all these awesome CRTs, and then we had to figure out a way to sync all the frame rates. So they had to put an expensive device on each CRT, which like apparently not insignificantly blasted the production cost for
sure.
Whatever they're doing. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, it's remarkable that this is being done in 1981.
Yeah, like frame rate flicker has been it's like TVs are so funny because they're built on our eyes being bad.
Yeah.
So like they work because because our eyes just like fill in the gaps all the time. But like this is why, for example, with octopuses, I think that's right.
Yeah,
octopuses. It's not
octopi.
Yeah, it's octopuses.
It's not octopi. Oh
no,
kidding.
it's octopuses.
Huh.
Because of I think because the ending should follow more of a Greek and octopi.
Yeah, it's a Greek root instead of a Latin root.
So it should be octopuses.
So their eyes are more efficient than ours, and so when we tried to do tests with screens with them, for the longest time, they didn't respond to it. And then once we got higher refresh rates on flat screens, all of a sudden they were able to respond to them as if they were moving images.
Wow.
Because they're smarter than us.
Idea. They are very smart creatures.
Oh, yeah.
I just like that they're smart enough to have spite. That's all I need. Not to not eat you anymore.
I love that they kind of will climb out of their pens in aquariums and go visit other fish, or sometimes eat other fish if you're not careful enough.
Well, depending on how the visit
into their own.
goes. Yeah.
And then they go back and they just let themselves back in and cover their thing. No one's the wiser. Oh yeah, perfect crime.
No walk of shame for this one.
All right, so this is becoming an octopus podcast, which I'm fine with, actually. Do you want to talk about how breakthroughs in cloaking technology are being based around using the pigments in their skin?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Actually, which is also kind of still Star Trek. Wonderful.
That's what I was going to say. It actually
roll with
fits in the theme.
If this was Star Trek 5, this would be perfect.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll have to do that
Or
someday.
6, pardon me.
Just so we can also talk about octopus.
Okay, all right, but let's move on. There is one last special effect I want to call attention to, which is Ricardo Montalban's chest. Or is it? Because I cannot find a source that indicates that it's not really his chest, but I also can't find anyone who 100% believes it. And Michael, before you joined, Sam and I were discussing is it like a push-up bra kind of effect going on with the outfit he's wearing? It's like a very strong V.
I mean,
accentuated.
they could definitely use some fashion tape. If they wanted to create more pec cleavage, they could use some fashion tape, which they do to either stick, clothes on. But there are ways to kind of push and lift using that. So they may have done that. But they did say that he had a very rigorous training regiment, even at his age when he filmed this. So there's a possibility that it is his actual chest, but maybe just some makeup to smooth it out and make it more luxurious.
I mean, the man was a bodybuilder, right? I mean, it would not be at all outside the realm of possibility for this chest to be real. But the reason I believe it's real is because another podcast, Mission Log, with John Champion is one of the hosts, and he on their episode about Wrath of Khan, he's pretty well plugged into this stuff. He's done a lot of research in this. He's like, no, there's not any record of an appliance. There's not, there isn't actually a seam line under the necklace, as a lot of people tend to say. If he's convinced, I'm convinced. That's what I will say.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fair.
I think if there is anything, I think there's just a little makeup, maybe some contouring.
Yeah.
But I think it's him. I think in general, they just maybe refreshed it to make sure that it looks young and supple.
Yeah. I will say Ricardo Montalban probably lived in the wrong time, because if he was if he was alive now and a young man, to show off his contouring regime, both how to apply the makeup and also just the bodybuilding parts would be...
He would have so many Instagram followers. Yes.
He would be so popular on TikTok and YouTube.
Yeah.
He would be like Ricardo's workout, and he would do that. He could even do reaction videos, because let's be honest, he's got the best reactions.
Reacting with Ricardo?
I would love it. He could watch anything and just be like, this I like. I mean, that alone would have been amazing. Honestly.
Now, for you out there, if you want to look sexy for the ladies, this is what you need to do.
First, you start with push-ups, because it should be sort of real.
But do it because it is what you wish to do.
Exactly. Which is good advice for anyone, even if it's coming from a maniac.
Yes. Yes. Write down the wisdom, consider the source, but then take what you will from it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a pretty good source. So I want to move on to just another fun trivia bit with this movie, which is the score, which is great. I love it. It's James Horner's first major work, his first major credit.
Yeah. And by the time he had done more Star Trek films in the future and become famous, when they wanted him back for Star Trek 6, he was too expensive for them. Which is another just messed up thing about Hollywood. I feel so bad hearing that. I'm like, good for you, James Horner, but also you couldn't just go back to hang out with your old friends, do them a favor. It's a shame. But we got that wonderful score in 6. Anyway, sorry, that's a tangent. I didn't need to go on.
But again, it's incredible that a person who'd go on to do fucking Titanic.
Yeah. Yeah.
to be such a fixture of Hollywood until he passed away, that they got him for super cheap because this was just his first thing. And they were like, I got a feeling about this guy. They liked his demos.
Yeah. What a coup, right?
Yeah. I don't have a lot to say about that. They just did a really good job. And the motion picture set such a standard for the type of music doing the theme that would become the theme we associate with Star Trek more than anything, frankly. The Next Gen theme originated with the motion picture. And you can see that this like big brassy orchestral kind of thing all of a sudden influenced the nature of all successive works in a way that like the TOS theme just doesn't sound anything like it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that did Horner do 3 as well? He did, right? Because this is, I think the score in 3 is a takeoff on this, and it's just as addictive and lovely. And I can just listen to this soundtrack without the movie. I mean, that's how much I love this. After the fanfare and the credits, and again, it reinforces the nautical edge of the film as well. It's everything is so stylistically integrated in a way that you wouldn't necessarily expect.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can confirm he did 3.
Thank you. Thought so.
Yeah.
It's lovely because it's subtle where it needs to be and swelling where it needs to be, and that's the mark of a great score, right?
Yeah.
Where it can take a step back when it needs to, but still add the beauty of emotion, and then kind of give you all the excitement and adventure later on when you need it. Especially considering that the protagonist and the main villain were never in the same space. So the score was like, the acting, yes, they did a great job, but the score actually did some of that tension heavy building, that heavy lifting of tension, definitely.
100%. And I'm sorry, I meant to mention this when we were talking about the exclusively Zoom/FaceTime conflict in this movie.
Yeah.
But Nick Meyer had a great method for dealing with Shatner in those scenes, where Shatner felt like he should, again, like Montalban, just play into the back row. Like the camera's 8 inches from his nose and he's apparently just hamming it up. And Nick Meyer wanted a more subtle take at one point. It was the, here it comes moment. Shatner would not give him a more subtle take and was just straight up just delivering the lines with a dead intonation because he was done. And that was his way of rebelling. And then Nick Meyer was like, perfect, that's the take I wanted. Thank you. And that's the one we see in the picture.
Yep.
Unbelievable. I'm just that's what a great director move, It's like you can know so many things, but knowing how to not manipulate people, but manipulate people for positive ends. Underrated skill.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a Kubrickian move, if you will.
Yes. Yes.
Learning how to get what you need, even when someone's rebelling, which is not surprising at all from Shatner.
No.
I feel like this is as good a time as any just to drop a couple trivia bits that we just should mention because someone will call us out if we don't. So I kind of referenced before Chekhov in his interaction with Khan. It's the thing everyone knows. Chekhov was not in season 1 of Star Trek. The Space Seed is an episode of season 1. In theory, Chekhov would never have actually interacted with Khan. There's plenty of headcanon excuses, such as Chekhov served on the ship somewhere else and just wasn't on the bridge and interacted with Khan at some point. It works fine. Into Darkness actually kind of does that too, because they put Chekhov in engineering for the Khan movie for some reason.
Yes.
Which has to be a reference.
It's just to support the headcanon. I swear to gosh, honestly. That's why they did it.
Walter Koenig has a great little reference on there, which I never knew until I was reading before this podcast. He saw that, what's it called? He saw that continuity error, essentially, in the script.
Yeah. To be clear, everyone was aware of this error.
Yeah. But he was here's the thing. I don't think at the point he read it, I don't think he knew if a lot of people knew. And someone brought it to his attention and he said, look, essentially, they've given me so much more in this movie to do than I expected, because look at Sulu. He's got nothing to do. He said something like, I chose self-preservation over continuity authenticity or something like that. And I'm like, good for you. Good for you, Mr. Chekhov. That's what I would have done too.
Yeah. Get that paycheck.
Damn right. Give me that close-up.
Yeah, I thought you were referencing. He had another quote where he said, like, "Oh, I just like to think that I held him up at the bathroom at one point on the Enterprise before he went bad." The other random trivia bit, Judson Scott, who is the right-hand man to Khan in this, actually is not credited in this movie, and that was because his agent fucked up, and they were like holding out for how he was going to get credited. And they ended up just putting the movie out there, and so his name's not actually in the credits.
Unbelievable.
And he's like the second villain.
Yeah.
He's the voice of reason.
Yeah.
He's like
he's the dragon. He's the lieutenant. But yes, you're
because he's like he keeps being like, you won. We got off the planet. Like, you're smart. Let's go live our lives. We have a ship. Let's go. And Khan's like, no, I must kill Kirk.
He tasks me. Yeah.
He tasks me. Yeah. Very good reading and very creepy.
I have a question. It's weird that I don't know this, but is he supposed to be Khan's son? Because the movie sure leaves that open to interpretation if you want to.
No, he's actually based on a character who was in Space Seed. The pronunciation makes it different enough. It's like Joaquim in this, and it's like I was looking at this one before.
Really?
It is referencing a named member of his crew in Space Seed.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
There was at one point supposed to be a baby of like Khan's baby in this from his wife, but they decided to cut that because the baby was going to die on the ship, and they were like, that's too brutal right there.
Yeah,
they didn't want to go with a fathers and sons parallel. I mean,
could have fit it in there.
they could have. One father, crazy, insane man who is obsessed with killing the supposed killer of his wife, but doting father. Other one abandoned his child because he was too busy raising the ranks in the Starfleet. Just have a lovely little. Is Khan actually that crazy? At least he was a good dad, Kirk. It's probably too complicated. You're right.
It's just too dark, but the movie ultimately hit the right balance when it was finally released after test screenings that were a little too dark and they had to put a little bit more hope into it. It hit really big. While it didn't have the same box office that the motion picture had, it being a quarter of the price meant that it was a massively profitable production for Paramount. They made so much money off of this and said, okay, we're going to keep doing these. And that's why we have a Star Trek franchise, like film franchise.
Yeah, and I don't know. I keep trying to process the sheer gulf of time and style that we traverse from the motion picture to this. And I seem to also recall this thing set a record for 3-day opening gross or something like that. Like it
at the time it had the highest weekend box office of all time. Now, it was dethroned pretty quickly. I forget by whom, but it also was a crazy year when it came out. It came out the same day as Poltergeist, and then E.T. opened the following weekend, as well as The Thing and Blade Runner.
Wow.
And then 2 weeks later was Tron.
Wow.
What a monster summer for movies. Jeez.
Yeah.
I would not have wanted to be competing with any of that.
No, 1982 has been called the greatest year for sci-fi by more than a few fans, and you can kind of see it when you look at that schedule.
Space and sci-fi for the win.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did 97 million worldwide was its gross, but its opening weekend in the United States was I was about to say 14,000, but that's not right. 14 million. It's like, wait, there's another comma in there. So yeah, it was huge, but this is the dawn of summer blockbusters still. So like it would go on, and obviously people attached to this movie would work on bigger box office hits such as Titanic with James Horner. So.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, like those movies also cost a lot more. This cost $11 million.
I do wonder, I don't know. How many of those costs they have to declare if they're able to use standing sets that they didn't have to build? You know what I mean?
No, that's fair. They had all those assets already, which is the saving grace. That's how they were able to make it so cheap. Again, this is a bottle episode. I just keep saying that because it is so fucking true. But like, compare this so famously when Friends ended in the final season, all the cast members were being paid $1 million an episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
With 6 principal actors. So that's $6 million right there.
Yep. Collective bargaining. it's a good thing
It's a
to
good
do.
thing. Yeah.
You know?
I think we can all agree with that.
Yeah.
We do.
Collectively. But because of its success, this movie has influenced the franchise in a lot of ways that just keep on going, keep on having references. Obviously, there's Into Darkness, which is an attempt at doing kind of Space Seed again.
Yeah.
Somewhat.
Attempt is right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the movie is fun, I guess. I'm going to give it that. I had fun in the theater watching it.
That opening sequence is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I really like that opening sequence
Yeah.
on the
Oh, yeah.
alien planet.
I-
And then they worship the Enterprise as a god.
Yeah.
I dig that. That was good.
It was funny. But I would say that I think the biggest issue with it, and I believe that the director that was involved with this said it best, is that if you're going to pay homage and do something as if you're doing it again, you should add another layer. And that they didn't do that. There was no extra layer added. There was nothing different. There was no different point of view. And so it didn't feel, it kind of felt like a caricature in his mind.
Yes.
And
Yes.
an insensitive one. I can't stop hammering this one. They cast a British man to play an Indian man.
Oh God, yeah. When they had an opportunity to undo the first miscast, which, by the way, Ricardo Montalban wouldn't change a thing.
Right.
But he's not Indian.
No, he's not Indian. I mean, it was the 60s and he's brown, so there's,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
it's more forgivable. But
yeah, like they made it worse.
yeah. Like, there's so much baggage just on that association right there.
Yeah.
I think like one of the biggest failings too was that and this is, okay, I don't want to get too into this movie because that's like another pass, not a fifth episode. But I feel like one of the biggest things was that like they knew that we knew who Khan was. And so like he says, like, Benedict Cumberbatch, who I have no problem with, he's got a lovely voice and definitely it's made for being a villain, honestly. And he says, "My name is Khan." And they like have a moment where it stops and it like stares at him like it's he doesn't break the fourth wall, but it's like it's supposed to break the fourth wall, like it's winking at the audience. And I'm like, but what does that fucking mean to the people he's interacting with right now? Like, you are literally being like, huh, audience? And like that kind of annoyed me because it was like, okay, if you're gonna do this, then like have them have something or make this be the actual, it just felt like his name was supposed to carry weight, and at the time there was no weight for it to carry.
Which it explicitly doesn't in Space Seed, which makes it even worse.
Yeah.
Because he introduces himself as Khan to obscure the fact that he was a 20th century dictator.
Right, exactly. Like that is like they figure out who he is. They're like, this is actually your full name, and they give his full name, and he's like, oh, you finally figured me out. Like, oh, they caught up, those silly humans. Like, there is something like so much more playful in like, I don't know. So I think that was part. It was just too serious. It was too serious. There's something much more playful with the original Khan, and
Yeah. It's hazardous to try to even pay homage to a film like Wrath of Khan because it sort of succeeds and shines in all the places that Into Darkness didn't. And like you say, we shouldn't talk about this all night because I did listen to a lot of the previous episode, which was very enjoyable on
The Into Darkness episode.
But like the reason that it is such a minefield to try and do that is because this movie, this movie could have been a pretty by the numbers resurrection of a popular villain and a fun action story. And it is. But on top of that, you have all of these wonderful themes layered on, which we talked about, getting old, friendship, mistakes, regrets. I feel old versus I feel young. Like it is so enjoyable at least 4 or 5 different levels to me. Mm-hmm. And then to people, all kinds of different people can find all kinds of different things in it. And it's a smart movie, and it's a movie that doesn't pander to you, and it doesn't insult your intelligence, and it's just perfectly paced to your point. There's so much that this movie does right. I think it was I remember being frightened when Into Darkness was said to be using Khan, and I was like, don't screw it up.
Yeah. I mean, I think like also to your point of kind of regrets and losses, and it's also about finding things over again, right? Because at the end, as Kirk is sitting there with his loss and knowing that his friend is gone, and also that altruistic, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, right? Because his friend sacrificed so that everyone could still be there. You know, his son comes to him and echoes his words back at him that he's just like, you know, that he may not have believed when he actually said them because they were words of comfort to someone else.
Yeah.
And then his son accepts him and says that he's proud to be his son. And so there's like this like lovely like full circle on that too, right? Because there's like such an incredible loss, but there's things that are lost and there are things that are found and things that come full circle. So yes, his mistakes came full circle and they kind of fucked him, but his mistakes also brought him to his son. His mistakes also brought him to this understanding and realization again of what the altruistic mission of ultimately Starfleet is, you know? So there's so many layers to this particular film that's really lovely and beautiful.
And it ages well.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the biggest thing about it. It's a movie that the first time you watch it, if you're a younger person, you can enjoy it, you can appreciate a lot of what's going on. But as you actually feel age, as you experience time and
For sure.
your own mistakes come back to bite you, or even just the times that you've pushed yourself too far. Like all of us have complained about our backs hurting recently.
Completely.
I forget if it's on mic or not. we have all experienced those aspects, and like it makes it feel much more real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I like the people have literally asked me at periods of like creative burnout in my life or whatever, which spoiler alert right now, I have absolutely answered, you know, how are you feeling, Michael? Old. Worn out, you know, and conversely, there are periods where after like when I'm recently rejuvenated and how young, I feel young, you know. I mean, it's very simple, but very dynamic and very complex emotions under the surface of these lines, delivered brilliantly by pretty much everyone who speaks them.
Yeah.
Talk for 6 hours about how great this movie is.
We should do an ad though, like an ad break case.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't actually do an ad break.
We should
Shit,
do
I didn't
that.
put that in the outline.
Yeah. That's okay because there's so many great shows on certain POV and we should have one talk about it now.
Hi, I'm Matt, aka Stormageddon, and I'm the host of CPOV Autographs at certainpov.com. It is a bi-weekly interview series where I interview folks from all over the arts, from writers to comedians to magicians to musicians, even actors, historians, podcasters, pretty much anyone who's willing to chat with me for a little bit. If you like interesting conversations with even more interesting people, go to certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, music is life, and life is good.
All right, we're back from that last minute ad. I'm sorry about that, folks.
He just gets really excited. If it's Star Trek, single tracked mind, what can we say?
Yeah, because it's such a great franchise, and this movie really established a lot of the things about the franchise that I love. Like for example, this is the first use of Romulan ale, which I was like, I loved it because that's just a running gag in all of Star Trek. Like. Part about being a Star Trek fan is having shared jokes that continue across the property, across the decades. And, like, that's a little bit right there. Romulan ale's legal.
Yeah.
That line's probably shown up in, what, like 7 movies? In almost every TV show. DS9 has a whole thing about how when they, like, make an alliance with the Romulans, all of a sudden it's legal.
Oh, yeah, the embargo's lifted, and now they can drink it freely. And then isn't it just way less cool at that point? I'm like, I was like, oh, forget it. Turn the TV off.
Right.
Did you ever
why by
make
Nemesis
it?
It had to be illegal again.
Oh, naturally.
So that Worf could have a hangover from it.
Yeah, and Worf not a fan of Irving Berlin. I don't know why. Did you make it as a kid? Because I definitely did.
Oh, cocktails for Romulan ale. I've seen a bunch of different recipes, so I've made drinks that I have called Romulan ale. I don't know if there's anyone that's like particularly authentic.
Yeah, there is. You get a glass of Sprite, you drop a blue Skittle in it, you're set. Yeah. If you're 9.
That sounds highly illegal. Highly illegal.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it takes this stuff a while to ferment.
Well, in the future, all that sugar is actually kind of illegal.
Honestly, that sugar should be illegal.
Klingon
High
aphrodisiacs.
fructose corn syrup. How evil!
That's the good stuff. It's for my health.
That's right.
Medicinal. Man, I love McCoy.
McCoy's the best. He's always the best. I love him. I love his snide attitude. I get him. Yeah. He is amazing. Actually, when I rewatched Space Seed, like, he's... Oh, God, in that episode, he's so fucking cool because Khan's got, like, a knife to his throat and he's, like, giving him advice on how he could kill him faster. Like, not answering his questions. He's just like, if you cut me right under the left ear, there's the large artery. You can end me right away. And Khan's like, I like a brave man. And he's like, I wasn't really brave. I was just trying to end I was trying to put an end to an argument, is what he said. And I was like, I love this man.
Yeah.
Dr. McCoy is a giant badass. And when you need a quick comedic cap to a deep elevator scene, the best way to do it is have the doors open on McCoy and who's been holding up the damn elevator?
Yeah. And then he asks, he's like, did she change her hair? And Kirk's like, I didn't notice.
I hadn't noticed.
And everyone's like, we know you noticed,
Yeah,
and he also knows
noticed.
you noticed because you would always notice.
Wonderful stuff, that Romulan ale.
So also, just in terms of like things that this movie sort of established, this is the first Star Trek property to establish that this is the 23rd century. Up until this point, they had always used Stardate to obfuscate the era that this is set in, and the decision to have it be 200 years in the future was only laid down here. And then since then, we have so much canon that is built around like the timeline of Trek, to the point that arguably, I would argue the second best Star Trek movie, definitely the best TNG movie, First Contact, is very much built around knowing what the timeline of Star Trek is. And that is, of course, another movie where we're going to play the Wrath of Khan game and have the sins of the past like come back to bite you and yada, 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 because Star Trek movies like to do that. This movie also establishes the default uniform for anything Star Trek from the period between the TOS era and actually TNG, to the point where whenever we see Picard in his academy days, when we see Wesley's father just before he died, which is only like a couple of years before TNG starts, he's wearing the red coat, like uniform that gets established here. AKA the best jacket ever to have been created by the hands of humanity. I love these uniforms so hard.
They're so good.
Oh, they're incredible.
I love that jacket. I love, like, every time he's walking through, like, and the lapel is, like, down and you get, like, a little bit of white, and then he's, like, I'm like, you could actually still leave that lapel out because it is stylish.
Dashing, sir. You know, my stepdad was a chef. I used to walk around the house. I used to steal a chef jacket from him all the time just so I could have that hanging lapel out front. I'm like, oh, that's how that works. That's cool. I always wanted to paint it red, and I never got around to it. I read a fascinating trivia fact about that if we have time.
Yeah. Sure.
So we all admire the jackets. The turtleneck underneath gets less celebration, but apparently that quilting around the collar, which is called trapunto, is really difficult to do, to the point where when they decided on that design, the only machine they could find to do it was an antique that was 50 years old, and they had one needle for it.
Oh my gosh.
So at the end of the day, like, the costume crew would, like, someone was entrusted with the needle so it wouldn't get stolen or even held for ransom because there was no way to replace it. Like, it's amazing to me.
I just want to say that for that poor needle protector, like, guardian, the guardian of the needle.
The guardian of the needle.
That is so much pressure.
Seriously.
And I do not envy that job. It's like, well, what did you do?
Same.
Well, I guarded a needle.
And you'll notice when they bring the uniform back later on, well after a lot of these shirts have presumably rotted away, you know, in Next Gen they use a different undershirt with a lower collar.
Yeah, a lot of times there's no collar even.
And sometimes there's no shirt. Yeah. Which is doesn't look as good. You need the trapunto.
It doesn't.
Yeah, not as clean with the lines.
No.
God, I read that same bit there because, like, initially they're going to have like a stiff collar that didn't. I think it was like you couldn't really move your neck very well with it, and they decided to go with that quilted style turtleneck.
Yeah. Which also tells us something important about the climate control on Starfleet vessels. Air conditioner always set to 58.
Yeah, honestly, that kind of makes sense with, like, the amount of, like, machinery they're working with.
Yeah.
Honestly, you should probably keep that all cool.
Blast that.
Well,
AC.
actually, it makes even more sense. So I forget the name of the book, but it was like the official like guide to Star Trek that they put out between season 2 and 3 of TOS, like behind the scenes one. And they talk about all the production designs that went into the ship, such as, for example, it's all smooth on the outside because the idea was that if you actually get out to space, you don't want to be wearing spacesuits to go make repairs. You want to have it actually all the vital systems on the inside that you can access.
Right.
And one of the things that they pointed out was like the reason that we're going to have just humans on the ship is that the ship is going to be set to human tolerance levels, and that there are other Federation species that also have ships made up of their species because their tolerance levels are set for that. And like Spock fits because he's half human, but Vulcan is actually much hotter, so presumably a Vulcan ship would be substantially warmer, and likewise an Andorian ship would be substantially colder. So
yeah, a lot of a lot of the like quote unquote extended universe kind of stuff, they have some wonderful extrapolations on that. The Mr. Scott's Guide to the Enterprise has several decks allocated to different living conditions for non-human crew members, and on DS9 they complain, there's like, why is it so hot in here? Well, the Cardassians like it hotter, so we're trying to fix it. I love those little bits of window dressing, I guess.
Yeah, because it fleshes those little tiny details fleshes out the universe.
Yes.
Just makes it more real and more immersive. And we appreciate that as fans.
Absolutely.
Whether it's an odd or an even movie, because just to wrap up all the talk about this production and this franchise, this also sets the odd even rule, which for people at home was that for a long time it was thought that every other movie of Star Trek was good. You go the motion picture, and then you skip it over to Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, and not as many people were big fans of it as they were of Wrath of Khan. Meanwhile, Star Trek 4 is infamously one of the most successful movies about whales ever.
Yeah. That was my favorite as a kid, partially because of the whale. I mean, honestly, I was whale obsessed, so that, it was just a slam dunk in my house for me.
Star Trek 5 is only good as a drinking game. And then 6 is a wonderful capstone to the original franchise.
Mm-hmm. Then when we get into Next Generation, it's more like, one of them was good.
So it works if you put Galaxy Quest in after Insurrection.
Oh, that is the hack, isn't it? Yeah, nice move. Okay.
And it feels like it should fit there.
It does.
It does.
But yeah, it's true. Because Insurrection and then Nemesis are both a bit rough, and Generations is a bit rough. And,
a bit, yeah. Well,
yeah.
I mean,
09 I like enough. Like, there's a lot of logistical problems with it. I know why people who don't like that series as a whole have issues with it. I think that most of those are the conveniences of getting them all on the ship together. Into Darkness is rough. Beyond, I love.
I love Beyond too. I love Beyond and 09, to be honest, I think. Yeah. But it was weird to have 09 come out and me be at the movie theater be like, oh, well, Nemesis really, I mean, if that didn't already break it, then this certainly broke it, because this is supposed to be an odd film. But you got to restart the counter, right? It just breaks down after Nemesis, that's all.
I mean, like I said, if you put in Galaxy Quest, it actually keeps it the whole way, because it goes Insurrection, then Galaxy Quest, then Nemesis, then 09, and if you like 09, it's good, and then Into Darkness, and then you have Beyond, which is a fucking great movie.
I love Beyond. Yeah, it has a villain problem, but it's a fun movie.
Sure, but that villain is Idris Elba.
But not that you would ever know it.
That's fair. No, it's fair.
Yeah.
He's under so much rubber. And that, look, it also has a Beastie Boys problem, which I don't think we have time to talk about, but it's fine.
But that's also a callback then to that doesn't matter. I would call it like either the fourth or fifth best Trek movie, but that's just because we've got Star Trek 2, 4, 6, and First Contact in there. So
yeah. Thankfully, we have that many good ones.
Yeah. So a lot of good ones, a lot of good content out there.
Yeah.
But if you're not in the mode for Star Trek content, there's a lot of good YouTube content out there that you, Michael Fisher, put out. So give some plugs,
man. I have to
man.
warn you, nothing in my content has a segue that smooth, so I commend you, sir. I do make YouTube content, and it is all about mobile technology, such as smartphones and wearables and laptops and tablets, and quite literally all the stuff that I am obsessed with as a direct result of becoming obsessed with Star Trek. I grew up wanting tricorders and communicators, and then when I got into about college age, suddenly we had communicators and now kind of pads and tricorders, and I could not be happier that my day job is showing them to you on YouTube. I do that as a personality called MrMobile, and you can find me at the MrMobile on most social feeds, and at Captain 2 Phones, Captain the number 2 Phones, where I am a little more casual and talk about occasionally Star Trek and other things that pique my interest. Yeah, very useful when your college friends give you a nickname that sticks into the era of needing an internet handle, because then you can just appropriate it.
Copy paste.
I have been a huge fan of your videos for a while now. I first got linked or tuned into you from Android Central's podcast, and it's been just fun. You do wonderful production quality on all your videos.
Thank you.
Weird thing, I noticed that some of the videos, this is a royalty-free song you used, but it's actually the theme song that the original Certain Point of View podcast used, and that continues to be the theme song for Scruffy Nerf Herders, our Star Wars D&D game podcast.
No kidding.
Yeah. So the first
amazing.
time I because it just came on in the background, you were it was like a segue from one video to the next, or like from one part of the video to the next. All of a sudden, like I hear this synthetic horn drop, and I'm like, oh my god.
Well, I love that, because I get it from a number of libraries, and we pay for most of it, but it's it's all royalty free stuff. So
right, yeah.
It does show up on occasion. That's awesome. Please link me to that podcast so I can fully get weirded out in the same way as you, except Mirror Universe weirded out.
But yeah, you do great stuff. People should absolutely come find you, check out your videos. You've given great advice. You helped when I had so I got the Function Tech slider phone, or FX Tech.
Yeah. Way to say
which
it right.
Unfortunately didn't work that well with AT&T bands, so I had to switch off from that, and I had good advice from you in terms of what Android phone I should get next. So I was really happy to roll with that.
What did you get?
I ended up going with the Note 20 because I wasn't quite ready to make the jump into foldables. Like the next foldable is what I'm looking at.
Stay tuned.
I want to get into the weeds, but
I'd love to be able to tell you more. I'm not allowed, but stay tuned.
I mean, all the stylus rumors for the Fold 3 is basically, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's probably where I'm going to go, because
this is the year. According to all the rumors, and I actually don't know this yet, they should be cheaper now. The focus this year was on making them a little bit more affordable. They will still be expensive as hell, but less expensive than they have been, and the trade-in offers are competitive.
So expensive as heck.
Wait, well, yes, right. Yeah, that's the next one down, right. Coming down from the ultimate summit of expensive AF, which they are not any longer, thankfully.
Right. But yeah, so people should go find you, follow you, check out your stuff, because you got a great voice, you got great editing chops, your production quality is fantastic.
Really appreciate it.
And good advice.
Great advice.
Thank you. Outside the world of tech, I don't know if that applies, but thank you.
After they do that, Sam, where can they find you?
They can find me here on this podcast with Case. And I guess I am checking the Discord more often. But you can find Case especially if you have any complaints about anything that I've said. Seriously. Case.
You can find me on Twitter at Case Aiken. You can find the podcast at Another Pass. You can find all of the shows that we do at certainpov.com, where you can also find a link to our Discord server where we're having tons of great conversations that Sam sometimes joins in on, so you can actually interact with her in some form. She's not entirely a figment of my imagination.
I'm more like lurk. I'm more like lurk and judge you guys for the comments you make.
That's true. Unless it's an Avatar comment, at which point you will chime in.
Yeah, I will. I will give a like a little BB-8, kind of giving up a flame or something of that sort. But yeah, generally I hide. I hide behind Case. It's safe there.
But you should totally go to certainpov.com, where, again, you can find the link to our Discord server where you can interact with us directly. You can come and have great conversations. You can also find more episodes of this show and so many other great shows. But we're about done here. Sam, what are we talking about next time?
Next time on Another Pass, we'll be talking about Highlander 2, The Quickening. But until then, if you enjoyed this, pass it on.
Thanks for listening to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Don't miss an episode. Just subscribe and review the show on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
I'm packing, so my room is not fit to be seen. And so I am in the balcony with the Muppets, and possibly I will disappear on you guys, or just be I have no body. I am just a head. I am just a floating head.
How far back do you have to go until you're no longer captured? Is that the...
I don't know. Hold on.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Okay.
I've got, like, tinier head. I don't know.
I think if you sat still, the further back you go, the more likely you would just forget that you're there.
Yeah,
right. It's just like, oh, the background doesn't move.
I just feel like I'm like Homer Simpson going into the
Into the
bushes. Yeah, into the hedges. Yeah. Oh, sweet.
Okay, wow.
Before the Wicked Witch of the West and those gals from Salem, there was Circe, the captivating and kind of catastrophic Greek witch who did more than just turn men into pigs.
I'm Rose.
I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Gloria.
Join us this fall on Circling Circe, the podcast where we talk about Madeline Miller's incredible book, Circe.
We go through the novel chapter by chapter. We laugh, we cry from laughing. We swoon over Daedalus and other Greek hotties and talk way too much about food, life, and scented candles.
I'm hydrated. I'm ready. I'm
You're
pumped
ready.
to talk about Greek gods and titans.
Let's do this.
Lasagna is not supposed to be cool. It's supposed to be eaten hot, stupid.
Who just looked at a cow and was like, hey, sexy, moo right over here. Like,
It's 11:45. I need to go eat my liver.
my Prometheus pate.
And Granny's like, get out!
We post every Wednesday, so mark your calendars
Make like Scylla.
Grab a sailor.
and dive in.
Find Circling Circe on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Do you want to do an outro? Or
Yeah.
Is that your outro?
That's it.
Is remarkable to have it that adaptable. And my Telegram notification is set to the Enterprise Communicator sound, which I will mute, as I always do when I come on podcasts. Sorry.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.